Well, yeah, everything's great in Japan, although the country is literally self-imploding slowly.
アニメはさ、絶対あれじゃん、日本のプロダクトだよ。
That
ア
was...
ニメとか漫画
I'm
とか
just
さ。
saying that was...
だけど
that...
その超大作を
Well, okay, I'm just
多
saying...
様
You
性なし
realize...
に作ったんだよ。
Welcome back to the lazyfluency podcast, where we have casual conversations switching between English and Japanese, so you can learn from and with us along the way. I'm Joey,
And I'm Yabu.
and the topic of the day is diversity. Before we get into that, make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and or drop a review at whatever platform you're listening on. We appreciate the support. And with that out of the way, diversity, crime, homelessness, violence, inequality, healthcare are all major issues that America can't quite seem to get a handle on. But in Sweden and Japan, these don't seem to be major issues. But some people might say that's only because those countries are ethnically homogeneous. But I thought America's biggest strength was its diversity. So what's the deal with that? Today we're talking about diversity in many forms. And yeah, any thoughts off the bat? Diversity. It's a big topic, but we kind of divided it into a bunch of categories. Ethnic, racial, sexual, cultural, and the ups and downsides to that.
Mm-hmm. まあ、最近だとね、東京オリンピックとか、まあね、あったけど、昔よりかは多様性は増えてきてると思う。まあ、考え方としてね、昔は、おじさんが、ちょっと、なんていうの、固定概念持ってたりね、ちょっと頭が固い人が多かったけど、今だといろんな人がね、いて、それをだんだん受け入れてきてるのかなっていうのもあるけど、まあでも、やっぱりあんまり外国人が住んでる人数的にはまあアメリカよりね少ないしっていうのはまだ残ってるかな。
You're referring to Japan specifically?
まあそう。うん。
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I guess we can, because there's a lot that we want to get talked about. But yeah, as I said, so that I've segmented it into 4 categories: ethnic, racial, sexual, in terms of like balance of different fields having men and women, and then cultural. And then there's like a whole separate thing when you look at a larger like level, like how you can see these things being impacted, like economical, societal, and governmental. And so the reason I'm kind of was stemmed or what's called inspired to make a video about this was something that's tangentially related, which is voting. There's a YouTuber called Mr. Beat who makes like videos about U.S. history and other types of history, and he made a video about voting systems where people voted on the best voting systems. And it got me thinking about what certain voting systems, like how they affect, I guess you could say, how they represent a population. And then I got thinking about like, well, populations themselves and how, like what kind of systems are most effective. So one of the, I think, most recent examples of, I think Americans looking to other countries that tend to be homogeneous to figure out how they solve a problem, I think was during the pandemic. Where in America, a lot of times, I mean, especially like the more liberal left-leaning people, I mean, I'm definitely more left-leaning, would say, hey, look at Japan, look at China, look at Korea, I think even look at Sweden, whatever. Look at how they handle the pandemic. But then the counterpoint, as I said at the beginning, is, well, twofold. They say those are small countries, even though China's not. But they'd say they're homogeneous. They're all the same, so that's why they're able to do it. And us, on the other hand, we're diverse, but obviously part of our political spectrum in the U.S. is like one side thinks diversity is not really a good thing, and the other side thinks it's a good thing. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think so the first thing I want to mention is when tackling this problem, a lot of people have tried to like show in like a scientific way the benefit of diversity in different aspects. And one of them that I was looking at, which I find interesting, is a publication in the Journal of the National Medical Association, August 2019. Not going too much into the paper because we want to cover a lot of different things. But something that it found was that it says during their review cases that they were looking over, where is it? There were positive associations between diversity, quality, and financial performance. Healthcare studies showed patients generally fare better when care was provided by more diverse teams. Professional skills-focused studies generally find improvements to innovation, team communications, and improved risk assessment. Financial performance also improved with increased diversity. And then they said, a diversity-friendly environment was often identified as a key to avoiding frictions that come with change. Those all make sense to me initially, but I mean, do you have any thoughts off the top of your head with diversity? Or maybe why do you think like Japan or other countries in the case of like the pandemic, arguably, or like how did you think they handled that, like in a good or bad way?
まあこのコロナの状況からするとさ、なんていうの、ダイバーシティがなんていうの、低いっていうの、ないっていうの、まあ
low, yeah.
そうそうのいい点としてはさ、みんなが同じ考え方を持ってるから、ルールを押し付けなくてもみんながするっていうのがあって、まあ例えばその日本人ってさ、どこ行っても今の時代マスクしてんのね。なんか、
yeah.
マスクしろって、まあ言われるけど、でも、なんていうの、法律でマスクしろとかはないのよ。
Yeah.
で、まあ今は政府がマスクしなくてもいいって言ってるけど、なんかマスクしないと入れないお店とかあったり、あと、もうマスクしてないと、結構、なんか睨まれるみたいな、もうその空気感があるのよ。
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like there are benefits to, so this is, I have some other examples. Maybe I'll expand your point. Another example I wrote down was trains. So there's a lot of stuff that falls under trains, but what I really mean by trains is public trains. So government run trains. The benefit of trains being the more centralized a train system is, the more effective it is, which is one of the reasons America sucks at trains. We used to be great at trains, but now we sucked at trains. Everything's like privatized and we can't have a good train system. And so obviously that's another sector of diversity where you have one person kind of doing everything, and that leads to very good efficiencies in Japan. But the other problem is if you want to change from that at all or diverse from that, or if there's a big upset for some reason in society, then I think it's very hard to change that again. And I feel like Japan is in this situation we talked about many times where I don't know, people are just wearing masks. I don't even know at what point how do you think, what would happen to make people stop wearing masks, do you think?
もうね、多分ここ5年は最低みんなつけると思うよ。なんかさ、例えば外で一人で歩いてるのにマスクつけてる人いるんだよ。だってマジで田舎とかで誰もいないけど、マスクつけてるんだよみんな。
Yeah, I mean, there's also the people wearing them in their cars, but that's probably out of convenience, I assume.
まあそれはあれじゃない。次出かけるところでいちいち外さなかったりするのめんどくさいから、ずっとつけてるんだと思うけど、まあアメリカでこの多様性がさすごいあるじゃん、アメリカって。そうするとさ、いろんな考えの人がいるからさ、マスク反対派の人はデモやったじゃん。なんていうの、マスクなんかつけるか、みたいなね。
Yeah.
そういうことが日本ではまあ起こらないとは言い切れないけど起こりにくいよね。
Yeah, I mean the thing is, America never had a unified front against anything in terms of like there was no unified push, so we didn't actually get anywhere. But then thankfully the pandemic wasn't a world-ending thing, so therefore things have kind of just returned to normal, regardless of the reality of like obviously there's still being like cases and stuff popping up. But for the most part in America, everything kind of just returned back to normal. But you could also say returned back to normal because nothing was really done. Maybe another way to think about it is if it was a big enough deal for everybody to mobilize or whatever, then all the people would have been convinced. Maybe that's a way to think about it. You know what I'm saying? You have a bunch of different opinions, and obviously there's a bunch of other stuff around that. But at the end of the day, everybody didn't die. It's kind of like, what was it? There was polio. I mean, there have been other diseases where like children, once a bunch of children start dying in like high amounts, because small amounts of children dying don't seem to bother America that much with like our gun violence. But once you get the thousands of, or 100, maybe tens of thousands, 100,000 of children dying, then I feel like things can be taken more seriously by everybody.
そもそもさ、マスクの話に戻るけどさ、マスクしろって法律だったんだっけ？
In America?
法律で。
Well, it was more like, so, yeah. There were quarantine policies or whatever, as well, but there were also, like private businesses were able to restrict or like entry or like business based on whether you're wearing a mask or not. And now that's like a state by state thing.
あ、そっか。
And I believe most states, I mean, a lot of states don't allow businesses to do that. Or if they do, people don't. But yeah, that was kind of what the situation was and still is. Yeah.
あ、待って、あとダウンサイド思いついたわ。例えばさ、なんて言うんだろう、多様性っていうか、多様性がないとね、頭がね、悪くなると思うよ。なんか、頑固っていうか、駅員さんの話で、ルールはルールだから、みたいな。ルールに従えないなら、あなたはダメみたいな。
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Something that I thought of when I was thinking about this was the Heian Jidai in Japan, where it's like 200 years of basically nothing happening because there's no sort of outside force or anything that was disturbing it. And so I was thinking...
江戸時代じゃない ?200 年続いたの。
With the peace? Was that...
200年
Oh, that was
続いた
Edo?
の。そう、江戸時代。
Okay, Edo. Yeah. I was thinking Heian because Heian makes me think of Heiwa. But what was I saying? Yeah, so you had a period of time where there wasn't much. I think we talked about societies in general before in terms of like how dangerous their stuff is. But I feel like if there's a lot of uncertainty and things are changing quickly, then diversity can be effective. Obviously, it's interesting because in the pandemic, you would assume that would mean that maybe a country like America could handle it well, but it actually just led to indecisiveness. But I think when you're like evaluating how effective diversity is, you kind of have to look at it from a very long or a longer scale perspective than like a few whatever years. Like if you look at the history of America in general, it's extremely impressive. Granted, they've done a bunch of bad stuff, but I'm saying a lot of it's bad. A lot of it is also good. I think America has been leading the charge in a lot of things that other countries slowly come around to thinking are good things. Like whether
い
it
ろ
be
んな意見をね、取り入れると、
yeah.
早く発展するみたいな。
Yeah. And a large part of that, I think, also creates the short-term issues, which America gets a lot of crap for, you could say. Like a lot of our inequality, and I don't mean just inequality, I mean expressions of inequality, like violence, gun violence, what would you call it? Just crime in general. A lot of those are obviously a result of having different people with different circumstances. Well, I mean, obviously forced circumstances in a lot of cases put together in the same location. But I'm a kind of other belief that in the long run, a system like that is way more durable than a system that is only used to doing one thing. Like you can see, Japan is, I think Japan's a funny example. Well, yeah, everything's great in Japan, although the country is literally self-imploding slowly. Like no outside force even came. Just Japan, you know what I'm saying? With its own population. Like it's not dealing with war between, like every other country around it. Like South Korea, North Korea have tension. Like an actual possibility of war. China and Taiwan have their own thing. There's Russia all around the world. The U.S. likes picking fights with everybody. Japan's just there. Nobody's bothering it, and Japan's slowly like, ah.
それいいことじゃないの。だって戦争嫌じゃん。
No. My point is, I'm not saying that war is good or bad. I'm saying despite nothing happening to it, even in the best case scenario, when like I'm saying for like not that much change or whatever.
まあそれはあるね。多様性がないとチェンジがないし、だけど治安はいいと思うよ。そこがgood point かな。
Well, I mean, depends on depends, I guess, what you're valuing it from. There was another thing that was reminded me of like the period of peace in Japan. There's another YouTuber, I think I mentioned before, called Holden Stone, who covers Roman history and German history. And there was a large portion of, was it Roman history? I think that was talking about how they didn't value innovation. They didn't think that you needed to have constant technological development or anything like that. Like that wasn't a motive. And so a lot of the smartest people and philosophers or whatever, they looked down upon people who like were inventing new things. And so I thought it was an interesting perspective, because one of the downsides you could say to not having diversity of thought and opinion is, as you talked about earlier with Japan, whatever is kind of done, it's almost impossible to change that because there's less. I mean, you require way more. It's like getting like a stone cube, like a massive stone cube, trying to push it uphill. Where in a more diverse place, I feel it's more of like you have a bunch of these like heavy balls that they can move. Like I'm saying, like you get a bunch of small groups that get more and more. You can think of different groups or whatever, but it's easier to get one moving than it is in Japan, where you have one massive not boulder. You have one massive cube that doesn't want to roll, and you have to go it uphill. But I feel like in America, it's more like you're kind of like on a flat ground with a bunch of like heavy balls. Like it's hard to move, but you can get them moving, or maybe snowballs. Yeah, and so that's kind of I think something that, at least in terms of innovation, like I feel personally like a lot of countries. I mean, obviously there's still a lot of innovation from like countries that have a lot of homogeneous. Like I said, there's ethnic homogeneity and racial
イノ
homogeneity.
ベーションさ、日本って結構あれじゃない？そのコンピューターもすごいし、なんか世界一
That's
早
not
い。
Japan.
そうだよ。
No.
でも前までそうだったよ。世界一すごいコンピューターとか。
No. I'm saying Japan wasn't the innovator. They were. I'm sorry. They weren't the creator of the computer.
そうなの？
That was America.
まあいいや。あとさ、車とかもさ、トヨタとかさ。
That was also America.
本当？
The cars were like cars and like the.
いや、トヨタって日本やん。
No, Toyota is Japan, but I'm saying the automation of cars and breaking it down into a bunch of steps and then for mass production was America.
じゃあ、what about this? アニメはさ、絶対あれじゃ日本のプロダクトだよ。
That was,
アニメとか漫画とか
I'm just saying that was
その超大作を
well, okay. I'm just
多
saying
様
you
性なし
realize
に作ったんだよ。
no. That was. I mean, although I really love anime, or whatever, the influence from that came from American comics. Like
No way.
No,
違う。
Osamu Dazai was a huge. No, like all the. No, I'm not even kidding. That actually is where that came from Walt Disney and American
でも
comics.
それは違う。だからそれからまあインスパイアされたかもしれないけどさ、実際に作ったのは日本人単独じゃん。
No. That's not my point. I'm just saying the original creation. I guess it depends where you draw the line, because you can always draw a line somewhere before it. But I'm just saying. So it's a whole conversation about what is new, what is not new. Whatever. But my point is now, I think last episode we were talking about people creating all these like cool works in Japan, but being difficult to find somebody who embodies them. Kind of the end of last episode. And I do really at least feel on a local level, day to day, you don't encounter people who have much drive just in general, just like to do something or be someone. And a lot of that I think comes from adversity. Like I said, I haven't mentioned it on the podcast. There's a show I'm watching called Blue Lock, which is about playing soccer, or a soccer show sort of. Yeah, about they're trying to train people to become like World Cup champions. Basically find the best forward. And there's this whole speech, which I found very interesting, talking about how, well, Japan is good at baseball because baseball, everybody has their own position and their set role. And it's all about teamwork and wanting to be a team or whatever. And then there's a thing about soccer when saying not only is Japan like for soccer, it's like an open field. So you have to be able to deal with, you have your roles, but you have to deal with less rigidity and constant change. And on top of that, there was another section saying like a lot of people in soccer who you're playing against, like talking to the potential soccer players of Japan, where the people be forwards, they're like, you're playing against people who are playing soccer to literally save their families from dying of starvation.
ね、そうだよね。
Yeah.
アフリカそれは
Well, not just Africa. I mean, there's a lot of places like in Central, South America, Africa.
だって裸足でね、サッカー練習するとか言うもんね。
Yeah.
そう。
Yeah, well, I mean that's like the tip of the iceberg. That wouldn't be considered any like that's the least of their concerns. But yeah, I mean,
それだけまあ貧困ってこと。
Well, my point is obviously I'm not saying that you should have make countries artificially poor for the sake of adversity to develop new ideas. But at the same time, this reminds me of the problem that I was listening to with. I mean, a lot of people who become wealthy and then they have children. It's a problem that they don't know what to do, or they're like, especially if they came from like a poor background, they're like, a lot of my development and the reason I got to where I am is, at least from their perspective, is because of the adversity they had to go through. But they're not going to, as a parent, make the life of their children worse just so that they have a better chance at developing good character or strong like resiliency. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So I'm saying you're let's say you're poor and you had to like you had a terrible like upbringing, abusive family, but then because of that you became very determined. You were able to handle all these things, and you were a very self-reliable person who was able to be successful. Then you have a child, and now you have a bunch of money. So the child has none of those obstacles. Therefore, they're probably not going to develop all the skills and personality traits that you developed.
まあそうだね。それ全然違う環境で育ってくるからね。
Yeah, but then so I'm saying from the parents' perspective, though, they really value the traits that allow them to become successful in the first place. So they want to give them to their offspring, but there's no way to do that in a way that seems ethical from the parent perspective. You know what I'm saying? Because the parents are like, well, technically, if I took away all your money, put you in a hut, maybe you would become strong or something like I did. But then that's not really ethical from the perspective of the parent.
まあね、普通のそういうなんていうのケースだとさ、まあ自分が苦労してきましたと。で、まあ今自分がお金持ってて、子供に絶対安定した自分と違って安定した生活を送ってほしいから、逆にいっぱいお金を与えるかもしれない。
Yeah.
そう。自分のように貧しい生活をしてほしくないから、なんていうの、まあいい大学に入れたり、いい中学高校に入れたりっていう。
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm just saying, I guess it depends on the result or the wishes of the parent or whatever. But I don't think that, I mean, a lot of times it's hard to figure out how you get what you consider good traits into somebody without putting them into, you could say, danger or uncertainty. There was another part of this, which I want to talk to you. I thought, yeah, exactly. Obviously, there's an overlap between racial and ethnic like similarities or whatever. But one example that I feel like is very interesting is Singapore, which I mentioned multiple times, which has a system where they had a lot of ethnic.
そうだね。中国人がほとんどじゃない、シンガポール。
Well, they have like an Indian population as well as Chinese population, as well as I'm missing another part of the population that's pretty. What's it called? Oh gosh, isn't it Philippine? Or is that different? I thought they have. I think there's 3 large ethnic groups. Malaysia? Is that it?
わかんない。
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think they have at least 3 or 4 large ethnic groups.
公用語が英語じゃん。
It's Singlish, technically.
まあ、Singlish だけど。
No, Singlish is official. It's not just me making up. Singlish is an official, like, designated. I don't know if language or dialect of English. I'm not sure which one it is. But they had a bunch of racial conflict and ethnic conflict, so like culturally as well. And they handled it in a way, like their government, they artificially mandated, and then physically mandated that different regions of their country had to have the same population distribution as the country as a whole. So let's say if you have like 12% something, 50% something, 20% something, then every district has to have that same distribution. And they did the same thing with poor families and wealthier families. So, and they were able to do that, and that actually lowered a lot of the racial tension I'm assuming that preserved a sense of like an identity, but I don't actually know. I haven't lived in Singapore. So, and I don't know, I don't like the dictatorship approach because like I said, the dictatorship approach, kind to me can work in an instance, kind of like the Japan in the pandemic, but is less durable as a long-term solution. It's kind of like when we were talking about diversity, something that came to my head was evolution in general, how like Darwinian evolution, how if you take everything that exists as a sample of something trying to survive, it's kind of like the random strategy is kind of most effective.
まあ、ダーウィンの、自然選択説ってやってね、同じ、まあ、ここで言うと同じ考えとかね、だとさ、まあ、やられちゃうけど、それぞれ違った考えだと思ってる人だと、何かのことが起きたときに、ね、まあ、なんていうの、一部の人だけ生き残れるみたいなね。それがまあ、なんていうの、その survive にいいっていう。
I mean, the same thing is also true with a lot of machine learning. Obviously, they've actually got more, depends on what algorithm you're using. But fundamentally, you can create a very smart like system for something. Let's say a game or something, where you just have it played a bunch of times randomly, and you just keep taking the one that's winning and then expanding on it and taking that version and then playing that one more, and it keeps losing or winning at random, and you just keep taking the one that wins, and you don't know why it's winning, and it doesn't know why it's winning, but it keeps winning because, like I said, it was built on the strength of randomness. And I feel like diversity is kind of similar to that, where I'm not saying that all perspectives are equally valid. Like, oh, we need to have Nazis to balance out our our heroes or whatever. But I always feel like that's just the notes I took in general is I feel like diversity has like less bias. So that's what I'm saying with randomness. Like you're able to overcome any biases that would people wouldn't be able to see. More resilient towards change in the long run. Maybe not the short run, like the pandemic or whatever. But in the long run, I feel like it's more resilient towards change. Mainly because of the first thing, less bias. Like when you have a country that has a lot of different perspectives or whatever, if you do something that hurts a large subset of them, they're going to, in theory, they're going not to be happy about that. So in the short term, I feel like that creates a lot of conflict, which is why in the US that we have so much violence and other stuff like that.
私なんか面白いのを見つけて、なんか、多様性の科学っていうなんかそういう本があって、でそれでなんか今の時代って昔より全然多様性があるじゃん。そうするとなんか例えばソーシャルメディアね、
Yeah.
SNS 日本語だと SNS って言うんだけどとかだとさ、多様性がありすぎて逆に多様性がなくなるっていう矛盾した現象が起こるらしくて。
In terms of like what, like economy or
なんていうの relationship ってソーシャルネットワークの中のなんていうんだろう、情報収集とかね。例えば
Oh, you're talking about how like people, there's so much information that people, maybe are you talking about algorithms, how people get fed the stuff that they like so they get stuck in holes? Or?
Kind of. そう例えばさ Twitter とかで自分がフォローしてると自分が好きなことをフォローするじゃん。例えば手芸が好きな人だったら手芸のアカウントとかいっぱいフォローすると。でもさ Twitter の中でさいろんなもうカテゴリーがあるじゃん。今多様性すごくてね。
Yeah.
だけど多様性がありすぎて逆に自分が好きなものしか見ないっていうことが起こるからこの矛盾が起きるっていうね。そう友達とかでもそうだし。
Yeah, exactly. And I felt like this is kind of adjacent, but there's a YouTuber I follow who's like trans and they're black as well. And so, they're called Kate Black, I think is her name. And they released a video today talking about how they don't identify as queer because all their lived experiences around them are similar to what they think like a cis white woman's perspective is. And you're like, okay, where am I going with this? And I found it interesting. They're like, well, everybody treats me like a woman no different than anybody else. My husband, she's in a polyamorous relationship with multiple people. And because of that, she feels, I don't feel any different than anybody else. And my first thought was, that's probably because you're living where you're living. If you were living in like, I don't know, Idaho or Japan or something like that, would probably completely fundamentally once again change the perspective. But a lot of like more, I think she lives in California. But a lot of people live in California because of that reason itself. So I feel like you can get very skewed perspective on the world or people in general nowadays. But if you look at the system from above though, and you look at the system like not from an individual's perspective, but overall, I think you have a lot more like silos of like small like confined communities that can at least identify problems. You know what I'm saying? So you have a lot of people who are ignorant, but you have a lot of people who are ignorant, like who know a lot about one thing. They might be ignorant about everything else, but at least you have a bunch of small communities.
そうそれがなんかいっぱい集まると問題解決できるよっていうのがこの本で言いたかったことみたいな。
Okay. Yeah. I definitely do think it's an individual, and from an individual level, it's problematic though. I talked to a lot of people who like, I'm just crazy. I'm just like, it's hard to believe how, in my opinion, I feel like sheltered their opinion of the world is. A lot of Japanese people too, because like they just don't think about. Like there's a lot of, I'm not saying you need to know anything about U.S. politics, but you should at least know who Donald Trump is. Like, I don't know how you go the last 4 or whatever years and have never heard his name, but I met people like that in Japan. I'm like, what?
それはないね。
No, it's happened. I met someone and I was like, what? You know who it is. I can tell you later. But yeah, they're like, who's that? I'm like, How's that even possible?
そこにその考えに触れなさすぎて、自分のなんていうの求めてる意見のことしか見てなかったんだね、多分。
I don't even know. I mean, I have some American friends like that too. One person who didn't even know our president. But you're like, well, I sometimes don't know my president. Or like in Japan, in America, 90% of conversation is politics. Not knowing the American president at the moment, like with Joe Biden, was just like beyond. Like, how?
日本はさ、よくチェンジするからさ、それもあるよ。
Oh no, not in Japan. I'm talking. This is American. So I'm saying like, yeah, it happens everywhere. But yeah, let us know what you think. How important is diversity? And there were other fields that I wanted to get to, but it's a really large topic. So yeah, let us know.
We're back.
戻りました。
Okay, so February 3rd we had Setsubun.
節分がありました。
Yes, so in Setsubun, how do you say in English? Like,
I
can
don't
you
even
translate?
know. Festival at the beginning of spring. I don't know what Setsubun is
It doesn't.
in English.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like spring, like in terms of temperature.
まあ今日はいい天気だけど。
Yeah, but like, how do I say? Chronological.
Chronologically?
Yeah, it's the start of spring in February. Yeah.
日本の春だけそれともなんか欧米では春、まあ全然違う。日本だけだと思う。わかんない。
Yeah, so on this day, 節分の日, we do some stuff. So things we do are なんだ throw away beans.
そうそう。鬼をやっつけること。
鬼は外、福は内って
You throw beans.
そう。
And it's like, oni wa so the demon's weird, but demon is outside your house, sort of, and then bring luck comes in.
Yeah, and in spring we want to like start fresh. So that's why you repel
the demons.
So the demons.
そう。
Yeah.
なんで豆はいつも使ってる？なんかその伝統的なことに関しては、その前の正月の話になる。
黒豆とか。
そうそうそう。まあなんかパナマの話してた時にその豆もつながってたと思う。
Yeah, well, I don't know why, but yeah, in Japan we tend to use soybeans. Yeah, this one is also soybean. So yeah, and also we eat the beans. The number of beans you eat is your age. So for me,
それ正月でやる。
really?
そのパナマの。そうそうそう。
So if you're 40 years old, you can eat 40 beans. That's a lot. But yeah, that's the thing. And also we have ehomaki, which is like sushi roll.
でも長いやつ。
Yeah, but like
長くて
this
太い。
size.
こ
Yeah,
んな
yeah.
感じ。
And like this
thick.
thick. Yeah, and then you face to the direction, which is called 恵方の方角があって、it changes every year. So I don't remember this year's 恵方 direction.
というのはなんか南北
北東とか、まあ、南北東とかね、方角。Yeah, and then you
その4つだけ？それともなんか不思議な東北。
like eight directions.
ああ、そうそうそう。
Yeah. And you face the direction and eat the ehomaki like at once.
All at once. So
yeah, all at once. You can't stop because like the longer you eat, the more chance you can get to make your wish.
それで早く食べた方がいいってこと？それとも遅くて
Yeah, the speed is up to you. So
でも全部食べなくちゃいけない。
Yeah. But yeah, it's impossible. So yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, we do on 節分の日。
でまあ今年初めてその恵方巻き食べたんだけど、一気に食べられたかもしれないけど、一気に食べたくなかった。なぜかというとめっちゃなんか高かったからゆっくり食べたかっただけ。そう、それで早く食べないとどうなる？一気に食べないとどうなる？
I don't know. You can't make your wish come true.
残念。まあおめでとうとは言えないんだけど、まあ春自分が住んでる今の国は春になったら それを言わないといけないと思う。冬めっちゃ嫌いだから、私。まあ、これは全然関係ないんだけど、この話したくて、まあ、あゆみはピクミンしてると思うんだけど、みんなピクミンというゲームをしてる人がいたら、この話好きだと思うんだけど、ついにピクミン3終わらせた、そのゲーム、ニンテンドースイッチのゲーム。
When was it released?
最初のピクミン3、10年前。
And what about 1?
2001年、なんかゲームキューブの最初の年、そう、2001年、2年ぐらい。まあ、とりあえず、ゲームキューブの話になるんだけど、なんていうか、ピクミン4は来年発売する予定なんだけど、私は結構なんかおじいさんになってる気がした。
Yeah. So there's a song for Pikmin 2 and I remember that song. And
どの頃か小学校
Yeah, it was like when I was in elementary school. Yeah. But when I searched on YouTube, the resolution.
その画像、
the resolution was so bad. Like I don't remember that was that bad.
で、それを見て、その広告は、まあ、ピクミン2、私が子供の時にやってたピクミン2は2004年に発売し始めたっていうこと。で、それは20年前に近い。19年前。それを思うと、まあ、それと同時に他の人を話してる時に、まあ、だんだん言及すらになんかそれすら知らない人が増えてる気がした。それでなんかこれがおじいさんになってるということで。
You're still in 20s だけど you feel like you're getting old.
でも他の、まあ、ピクミンのファン知っておくべきことは、日本ではピクミンの歌があって、それすごくなんていうか
なんだキャッチーな
キャッチーだと思ったのでみんなを知るためにちょっとだけ
It's called 種の歌。
種の歌。
Seeds song.
Yeah, Song of Seeds かな。
で、so probably some of you guys know this song だけど、まあこれ very catchy だからね、まあ一回聞いたら何回もリピートします。はい。じゃあ
どうぞ。
赤ピクミンは火に強い。青ピクミンは溺れない。黄ピクミンは高く飛ぶ。紫ピクミン力持ち。白ピクミンには毒がある。個性がいろいろ生きているよ。まあこれがlike there's 3 parts and yeah it's, the part I sang was first part、
でもその懐かしいゲームキューブの時代に戻りたかったら YouTube でピクミン種の歌
種の歌
探してください。
But there's no English version
多分日本語版聞いて、まあ私ももちろんこの日本語版聞いたことないんだけどめっちゃ懐かしい気持ちになったでまあ
Very catchy, right?
そうそれだけ言いたかったここで全然くだらない話And we're back with the final section. And if you made it to the final section, that means you send an email to lazyfluency@gmail.com with a question language related and or otherwise. And this week we have one question, but it's fairly long. But
PAPODT.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Japanese comments, please. But yeah, here's the question. It's referring to last week's episode about work culture or just working in general. Recently, I stumbled upon this phenomenon called the stay-at-home girlfriend. It's a Zoomer woman who chose to stop working and stay home, mainly catering to her boyfriends, but also spending the day with their hobbies of yoga, makeup, and social media, posting all the while being financially dependent on their BF. On the face of it, this seems appallingly anti-feminist, but why should these women want to work? Second wave feminism was supposed to herald a reality where opportunities would open up to women and they could achieve career success and satisfaction the same as men. That ended up being a raw deal, and Zoomer women know this. In reality, women still need to be twice as good, work twice as hard, and all they got in return was, at worst, some boomer boss who will sexually harass them, and at best, belittle and mansplain them to death on a daily basis, and they'll still get paid less. So given the current economic reality, which you expanded on, why work hard? Why work at all if you don't have to? Thanks for the comment. The first thing I'll say is that, just to be clear, the Gen Z Zoomers was not relegated to just women working less. Everybody is. I think we talked about previous women, episode, but women are actually, it's a weird, like, I don't know if rubber banding or what do you call it, where there's actually way more women trying to get into higher positions of work than men currently. Like I told you, universities are all primarily women going to upper management. But yeah, so obviously there's like there's a drop when you get to like the 30s because a lot of women stop working to have children, and that's a whole like dynamic. But I mean, let me see here. So why work hard? Why work at all if you don't have to? I guess the first thing we should talk about, which we talked about a little before, was what is work? If you mean receive money, I feel like a lot of people, like if I asked you, I don't know, what's something you like, drawing or whatever. Let's say there's no business here. I just say, you can spend time how you like spending your time, and I'll just give you money every month. You know what I'm saying? There's no market. Just ignore all markets. You would like to do that, right? You know what I'm saying? No, I don't mean whatever. I mean whatever it is that you want to do, and I don't mean in general. I'm just saying, just okay.
なんかそれ生きてるだけでお金もらえるみたいな感じじゃん。生きてて好きなことしてればお金もらえる。
You're kind of skipping ahead. You're skipping ahead here. You're skipping ahead here. I'm saying.
絶対そうじ
ゃん。Well, that is. I mean.
でしょ？だから好きなことをやってお金もらえるんでしょ
？Yeah, but then yeah. Depending on how you implement it, you're kind of jumping. What's it called? The homatsutento. It's funny. I remember the Japanese expression, not the English one. The cart before the horse. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm suggesting is like when discussing about why you should work, it's kind of hard to define work unless you just define it as something you're receiving money for.
Definition.
At the point that you don't need money, if that's our assumption for working, it's also hard to define. What does it mean to not need money? Like covering your basic necessities?
もうでそれでもう将来ずっと今持ってるお金で生きていける保証がある場合はもうお金っていうか働かなくていいんじゃない？でそれが how
Yeah, but I'm saying to know that you'd have to know all the desires you'd want to have, or you will have, and aspirations, and you'd have to account for like economic downfalls and like there's a lot of uncertainty in the future.
So you're saying おじさんとかおばさんはまあ大体定年が60歳だっけ60歳で定年だとするともうその後はいつなんていうの何か起こるか分かんないからずっと働かないといけないってこと？
Well, I'm actually saying that is a current problem in the US and Japan. Have you seen how many people working are? Because they...
それは将来が不安で
No, and I'm saying a lot of them need to completely adjust. Like a lot of them, if you ask somebody who's a kid what they want to do, and then I don't know, let's say one of these old men who's still working at like a minimum wage job into his 70s or 80s, that's probably not what they wanted to do. You know what I'm saying? Maybe if it was, then great. Well, I'm just saying like we're getting there's kind of two different. Or a lot of different political like or economic systems that revolve like similarly or tangentially related to this but they fundamentally are asking a question like how much does a given person need? Like, because I feel like if we define work based on something to me it seems like work and the way it's used is something you don't want to do to some degree but you have to.
じゃあ好きなことやるのは仕事じゃないってこと？
No, I'm saying to some degree. So for example, like even if people are doing, let's say like, I don't know, manga, Japanese manga, this is a great example. A lot of people are very passionate about it. They like doing it, but then the rate that they have to do it is ridiculous. And then it causes sometimes so much stress they end up killing themselves.
全部がいい experience ではないからね。
No, it's not experience. I'm saying, but that's tied directly to a market. So I'm saying like economic market because their whole, you know what I'm saying? I think it's a complicated question to say, like, to define what work is in another way, other than if you just say you get money from something. Because I guess philosophically, if work is a task that you need to do that is separate from connecting to like your financial stability,
うん
then to me that just seems like anything that work by definition is something that you're doing that you don't want to be doing. And that I think that is what is argued to some degree in like under like a Marxist lens of like capitalism. I mean, I don't want to go too far into that, but basically like any work under a system, like under our current system, is like inherently exploitative. Therefore, all forms of work are a form of like what would you call it? Like they're a labor exploitation, i.e., you are getting taken advantage of. Therefore, like all form of work. I mean, you can even think with you being a doctor. It's like,
でもなん
like people have to fundamentally, the reason people have to work and the reason that you have all these systems is because people know that without them, you'll be screwed. You'll end up with no home. You'll end up with no guarantees or no safety, no net, and you become homeless. And I'm saying, and that is what makes the majority, even people who want to do what they want to do, whatever, like there's so much extra stress put on them. So it's not that I'm trying to like avoid answering this question. I think like fundamentally answering what work is in a way to answer this question, I feel like is difficult.
あれ私はその仕事をやってやりがいを感じるものが仕事だと思う。例えばさ、絵描くのが好きでさ、ただ絵描いてるだけで、趣味で絵描いてるだけでお金がもらえるってなった時に、それを仕事として自分が満足するかで、満足しないんだったらそれは私は仕事と考えない。
No, but, okay, but what about like I said the mass majority like population who does, I mean there's a huge chunk, especially in America and in Japan too. They do jobs because they have to, or the third, I mean a lot of parts developed places in the world, they have to work because they have no other way to provide for their family. Like it's weird to not call that work. How does that not work?
あれだよ、やりたくない仕事がある。例えばサラリーマンでなんだろう、朝、7時とかに6時7時に出ないといけないで帰るのはもう夜9時とかいう人もいるじゃん。そういう人の中で、会社の中である程度、タスクがあるでしょ。で、そのタスクをこなしてって、自分頑張ったな、仕事やってるなって思えてるなら、それはやりがいを感じてる仕事なんじゃないって思う。
Well, I'm not saying やりがいを感じてる仕事. My point, or the way I'm kind of thinking about it, the more I think about it, is I think the best way to think of work is something that you feel compelled to do. You feel compelled to do it, and for a reason that you are not content with, but you still do it anyways. And if we call it like that, then I could say that even within things that you like to do, there tend to be elements of work because of our economy. So even if you're a mangaka, you could say, well, this part, if I took away all aspects of the outside demand and everything, this is what I would like to do. And then you have the sections that you don't like doing. Think about a doctor. You have the paperwork and stuff you don't like to do, and then maybe you like have the actual, like you're talking to the patients or whatever. Obviously, in our current system, all this would be defined as work. But I'm just saying, to answer this question, in my head, what is work is the thing that you feel compelled to do that you do not want to do. Basically, that's it. The things that you feel compelled to do that you don't want to do. You don't have to receive money for them, necessarily speaking. It could be like, I don't know, you could talk about a society where you're bartering your goods or whatever. But
じゃあ何それをジョーが言ってんのは、仕事をしててそれの嫌な部分だけを仕事っていうの？
Yeah, but 嫌な部分 as defined by I guess if you want to keep it that short. Yeah, basic or something. It's not that it's just you dislike it, because it's that you fundamentally feel compelled to do something you would not otherwise choose to do. For example, I can do a lot of stuff that I don't like in the moment. Like I don't like sometimes waking up early and going out and run when it's cold. But I would choose to do that in any situation because I like overall the experience. You know what I'm saying?
そうでしょ。だからそれがthat's what I'm saying だよ。
Yeah, no, but I'm not talking about the instance of it being unpleasurable. I'm talking about the ultimate decision for you to do it is not coming from an intrinsic want to do it. It's coming from a feeling of compulsion, or it's not compulsion, a feeling of or maybe coercion or a need to do it. And I'm saying, I'm kind of defining work as that.
だからそのある目標を達成するために嫌なこともやんないといけないじゃん。でもその最後のゴール、やりがいを感じる っていうことを目指すためにやることが仕事なんじゃない？嫌なこともやる、ペーパーワークもやる。それを私は仕事って思
Well,
う。
I don't think yadiga has anything to do with work. To me, work, especially at least not the way that we currently think about work. I think work isn't intrinsically, like I said, if everybody in the world, 99.9 whatever percent of people, the only reason that they're doing work or their whole lives are built on going to school, whatever, are built to come into an economy and to have to do that out of a feeling of like compulsion or coercion or whatever you want to call it. To me, that I can't combine yarigai to that. That to me seems like what work fundamentally is. Then like, because you don't get rewarded necessarily for how much you want to do it. You just, if you do it, you do the task and you receive money. Separately, I feel like from that is everything else, like your actual intent and your desire. So, I mean, maybe this is getting too philosophical, but I find like it seems like a fundamentally simple question. I guess to me, what I would say, why work? By my definition, there is no need to work. If you don't feel there is a need to work, it's basically, or that we could say it. There was a video I saw that was talking about, what was it? The reverse law, as in basically the idea that there are many things where the more you work to achieve them, the less success you'll have in achieving them. And it used the example of something like this. So I'm about to give you a task. Don't think about a pink elephant. What are you thinking about?
言うなって言われ、考えるなって言われたことを考えるでしょ?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's kind of a point where if you're doing anything that's not thinking about a pink elephant, you will be able to achieve the task of not thinking about a pink elephant. But when you're actively trying to not think about a pink elephant, that's all you can think about. So that was an example of the reverse law. And in terms of how this applies to work or desires or anything like that.
仕事と思えば仕事になっちゃう。
No, it's a little different from that. Or at least the application I'm talking about. So, because it was also tied to Buddhism, at least in the description of how it was. Basically, like a lot of these things, obviously a lot of these come biologically. Like people don't want to die of starvation, whatever. But if you never have the desires to do many things, you won't feel the regret. You won't feel like you have this sense that you need to accomplish something that'll cause you a lot of suffering and pain, basically. You know what I'm saying? If people never wanted a big mansion or whatever, fancy sports car, or even if you bring it further down, if you don't want to own a home, if you don't want to have this or that, you can keep bringing it down. The less stress you're imposing on yourself.
まあそうだ。それはそうだ。
Yeah. And so like obviously something I found funny about this is like it's very Buddhist because the ultimate conclusion that you can take in
無欲。
from this, yes, if you have absolutely no desires, even to live, then like or your hunger, like the most Buddhist thing to do, which is funny because Buddhists did this. And I wonder if they did this out of a sense of actual true, like this came from this place or not. But there's a whole notion, this came from a lot of Japanese, what is it called? Famous, Osamu Dazai had a big piece, like the Phoenix. It's a really long series. You've seen it before. It's like the Phoenix is like this. It's like but anyways, there's a thing where and this is based off real world. Yeah, exactly. Where real world monks, they literally would sit in a hole and die of starvation. But on their own, they would choose to do that. And I feel like that might be an expression of this, and they're content in doing so, if that makes sense. So I feel like that's a really badass way of the reverse law. Like it's kind of nihilistic. I don't know if it's nihilistic. It's weird in a way. You're saying if you want nothing, you don't even need the desire for food, but then you just die. So I don't go that extreme, but I do think that there's a degree of, if you realize what is truly important to you, it takes away a lot of the stress you put on yourself to do or succeed in something. But yeah, obviously from my perspective though, there's a lot I still want to achieve and do, regardless of the chance of failure and the stress and other stuff it puts on me. Yeah, I'm not sure if we answered your question, honestly.
仕事って何ですか?
Yeah, but I put up, yeah, there's a lot of words there, a lot of thoughts concerning work. Like I said, I don't think there's any intrinsic reason to do anything if you think about it from that perspective. If you don't need to, defining whatever need to means. Yeah. Thanks for asking the question. That bell means we reach the end of today's episode. Thanks for joining us in another lazy conversation towards fluency. If you have any language-related questions and are just looking for general advice, send an email to lazyfluency@gmail.com and we might respond in the next episode. Also, make sure to check out our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and more. We'd appreciate the support. This has been Joey
and Ayumi.
signing off. じゃあねー。